Hello and welcome back to a brand new DNF1 F1 podcast. I hope that you're all doing well. Thank you, as always, for being here and tuning into the show. We've got a lot of exciting news to talk about, but of course, as always, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and of course, if you listen to us on your favorite audio platform, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. There are plenty of you guys that listen to the show that haven't left us a 5-star review yet. We really would appreciate if you could. Even if you don't think we're worthy of 5 stars, please do leave us a review and some feedback. We really would appreciate this and it helps us out a lot. As always, joining us for another race preview, we have the DNF1 panel of Courtney Pine and Lee Wallington to dissect all of the news, compartmentalise everything that went down at this weekend's Grand Prix at Montreal, Canada. Courtney, let's go to you first. How are you doing, mate? And what are your thoughts after a bit of time of thinking following a Canadian Grand Prix that had quite a lot of action, even though the inevitable result of Max Verstappen winning did deliver once again?
First of all, I think I missed the dress code today. You two have got your uniform on, and I'm here with my bright yellow shirt. I know some of the Max Verstappen fans who listen see me as a bit of a lemon, so I thought I'd live up with appropriate attire.
You're
But
just
yeah,
supporting Jordan today.
yeah, that's it. That's it. It's a British thing to support the underdog, so why not? But yeah, the Grand Prix itself, yeah, the battle for P2 was interesting. Alex Albon was probably the highlight of the race for me. And yeah, plenty of talking points. We could even talk about free practice this time, which is a rare occasion for us to do. So bring it on.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we should start off, first of all. We will talk about Max Verstappen in a moment. Lee, this comes to you. Initial thoughts following the Canadian Grand Prix?
It was, I think, a very enjoyable race. Obviously, there was a lot of what ifs and what could have beens, but overall, there was a very interesting battle for P2. There was battles for P7 that seemed to go on the entire race, and there was battles up and down the grid, just not for P1. But it was a really enjoying race, and I'm glad I tuned in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you never get any guarantees when it comes to Formula One that every race that you're going to watch is going to be an absolute classic. I wouldn't say this one was an absolute classic, at least not compared to previous Canadian Grand Prix that certainly fit the highlight reel. The 2011 Canadian Grand Prix, of course, one that many F1 fans will remember, that last the first challenge that Jenson Button put together and completed on the final lap, of course, surpassing Sebastian Vettel. But overall, I thought it was a pretty good race. A lot of strategic elements as well, because, of course, with the ever-changing conditions this weekend and the interrupting practice sessions for different reasons, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, you couldn't really get a handle on the conditions or how the tyres were going to behave. And we had a little bit of jeopardy on tyre strategy, a little bit of variation, and some making the tyres work for them got better results, and some that obviously had to react didn't do so well. So yeah, a lot was going on this weekend. It certainly was one of the more enjoyable races this season. But of course, the first thing we do have to talk about, the one constant that has remained throughout 2023, is Max Verstappen's dominance and supremacy in the sport right now. And just to tote up the numbers, this was Red Bull's 100th victory as a constructor in the sport. Adrian Newey, the chief designer and aerodynamicist, the legend himself, 200 victories in Formula One in that role. Obviously was collecting the Constructors' Trophy for Red Bull, which I thought was very appropriate and fitting of the occasion. And considering the company he was keeping on the podium as well, I think very appropriate for the circumstance and the occasion. Of course, for Max Verstappen himself, 171 races. He's now achieved his 41st race win, which seems remarkable given how long he's actually been in this position in the sport right now, equaling the late great three-time world champion Ayrton Senna. Now, of course, Max himself was not ready to draw comparisons. He'd rather distance himself from that, and of course that's up for pundits and fans like us guys to talk about that in a bit more of a whimsical style rather than being overly serious about making comparisons between Senna and Verstappen. I'm sure many people probably are quite happy to do so. But to sum it all up, it just goes to show right now that we really are in the Verstappen era more than anything else. And no matter what is being thrown all across the circuit or what other stories are going along. The guy is in absolute control of everything that is happening. And I can't help but feel that it really is a case of when rather than if he's going to win his third world championship this season. I think at this point, guys, we should almost be taking bets as to which race he's actually going to confirm his third world title at this point.
It wouldn't surprise me if he emulated Nigel Mansell in '92 and got it done halfway through the season. Obviously, there's a lot less races in that season, but I think the pair of you have made good points. Really, I think first of all, look, we can't deny that Max, as said many times, it will go down as one of the all-time greats. He's the fact that we're already having these comparisons and he's only 25 years of age says it all. But at the same time, you look at what's going on behind Max, and the reason why I mentioned you, Lee, you talk about like the what ifs. Now, just imagine if for whatever reason Red Bull were pegged back a little bit, or Aston Martin and Mercedes took that step forward. We're not far away from having that mouth-watering prospect of having Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, and Fernando Alonso on the same area of tarmac. But we are so close to like having the juiciest of title battles. I'm hoping next year, because like Aston Martin are making steps forward, Mercedes are making steps forward. So I'm just really hoping. Look, I don't want to take any credit away from Max. I really do believe that he will be the driver of his generation. I do think he will go on to break Lewis's record. I just can't. He just seems to be an unstoppable force at the moment. But just for the sake of the entertainment aspect in future races, wouldn't it be amazing to have Max Verstappen, Alonso, and Lewis regularly battling for race positions? It would be so good for the sport.
Absolutely, and we had Alonso and Hamilton referring to the podium that they shared as iconic. And in a way, I can totally understand where they're coming from. I mean, you've got, 11 world championships between the three of them. It will most likely be 12 by the end of the season. So many race victories. Now, I think like over 170 race victories between them, although albeit Hamilton has the lion's share of those, understandably. But it really did show that on merit as well, because, I mean, they shared a podium in Australia as well, and there were different circumstances, perhaps why that one was a little bit more of a surprise, if you like, than this one. But I really understood the magnitude of how brilliant these three drivers were together. And I think it raised the question, have we seen a more iconic podium in Formula One? I mean, I want to put the question to you guys. What do you reckon, Lee? Have we seen a more iconic or greater F1 podium than we saw yesterday in Canada?
In recent memory, I don't believe so. At least in a long time, we haven't had a podium that chock full. Obviously, I can't remember who Michael Schumacher last shared the podium with when he got on P3. Was it in Valencia?
Wasn't it Alonso and Raikkonen? I believe it was. I think Alonso won that race and Kimi was P2 in the Lotus.
Still not about podium between the three of them either.
I have one, but it goes back years.
Go on.
There must have been a time in '93 where you had Schumacher, Prost, and Senna on the same podium.
Yeah, I think it was the Spanish Grand Prix in 1993. And I'm cheating a little bit on this. I'm not remembering this completely off by memory. I remember seeing a picture, I think it was, of the three of them on a podium where you had Senna in the McLaren, Prost in the Williams, and Schumacher in the Benetton at the time, where they shared a podium. Now, with retrospect, that podium was iconic, of course. But at the time, you had Alain Prost, a three-time world champion, going to win his fourth. Senna, a three-time champion. Schumacher had not won a world championship. I only think he won a couple of races at this point. So Schumacher was kind of like what Verstappen was perhaps in 2019 when he took a couple of wins off Mercedes. It was like, this guy's really good, but we need him to have a world championship winning car to see how good he really is. So I think you're going to have to go as far back maybe as like Senna, Prost, and Mansell at the time, back in 93 or 92. Was it 90? Yeah, somewhere at that time. To find a podium of that magnitude. Maybe something with Lauda as well, maybe towards the latter end of his career.
Fangio, Ascari, and Moss.
Again, yeah. I mean, they all
Going
are
back into the 50s. There we go.
I think
That's got to be a
when
good
you look at the
podium.
numbers, when you look at the numbers, I don't think you have a podium more iconic than what we saw yesterday. I mean, in dominant eras like we've been seeing, we've been often used to seeing the Hambot Ver podium, for example, or the occasional one with Rosberg and Hamilton, and Vettel was up there with them as well in the Ferrari. So you know that, I can totally understand. I think with Adrian Newey as well as the designer up there taking the constructors trophy, I think that just added to it a lot. And I think in a weird way, it kind of, even in this era of dominance right now, where some fans are saying, oh, it's boring because Max Verstappen is winning every single race. We really wish it was exciting and there was a battle between these three all the time. I think the fact that we've got such greatness up there on that podium, and it does give you that hope. I mean, we had something in Qatar last year, I think it was, or 2021. I can't remember the year. Alonso was in an Alpine, so it didn't really have the merit to it. But it is teasing us right now. We need to get these three in very close competitive cars. We've got Alonso and Hamilton doing that, but we need them to get faster or Verstappen to get slower. So we'll just have to wait and see how that goes. In terms of the race itself, with Max Verstappen, whilst it was a brilliant performance in qualifying in the ever-changing conditions, he handled that incredibly well, as we've often expected from Max Verstappen. And there has been an argument that there's been a battle between Max and Red Bull, whereas Max wants to finish the race in the fastest possible time. Red Bull want him to take the Alain Prost mantra and actually finish the race in the slowest possible time to make sure there's not any reliability concerns or incidents. In the race itself, Max didn't have it all his own way. Now, there's going to be plenty of questions regarding how much Max could have won this race by. Was he being held back by his team? Was he managing his performance? But there was a moment where on the radio, Max had announced that he'd ran into a bird during the race and he got caught up in his brake dud. And I think I saw a picture. It's a bit of a graphic one, so I wouldn't advise it if you're a little bit squeamish, unfortunately. They did manage to find that unfortunate bird that had got caught in Max Verstappen's brake dud, which suggests that Max was managing a bit of an issue because it could have caused potential overheating. It's what ultimately ended George Russell's race, not for the same reason, but obviously because he had some brake issues. So, in a way, it was quite trepidatious for Red Bull Max Verstappen, and I think fair credit, they were able to manage it rather well because it could have easily gone pear-shaped.
Yeah, it just shows how good you are when even divine intervention can't affect your race results. So it's quite reminiscent of when Lewis went over the line with three tires. That level of domination that the W11 had. And yeah, you just have to take a hat off. And I've always had the utmost respect for Adrian Newey. He really is. You talk about legends of the sport. You said it yourself a few minutes ago. It's very easy just to look at the drivers, but I do feel that Adrian Newey will go down as the best F1 designer of all time without a shadow of a doubt.
If he isn't already, to be fair. I think, you look at the numbers with Red Bull, as we were saying already, 100 wins for them now. Adrian Newey winning 200 Grand Prix as a designer, engineer, whatever you want to call him, is an absolute guru of Formula One cars. And yeah, it is amazing how Red Bull have managed to, I suppose, manage the Adrian Newey as an employee, as a consultant. They've given him free rein to go and do his own projects and pulled him back when they've needed him to. They've never really held on to him in a capacity where he has to be at Red Bull all the time. In a way, it's probably why it didn't work out at other projects, why he was there for a while, was successful, and then moved elsewhere. Looking at Red Bull right now, they seem very much in control of this current situation they find themselves in. With Max Verstappen especially, there is an era of inevitability around it. That being said, on the other side of the paddock, or the other side of the garage, you have Sergio Perez, who right now just can't seem to get it together at the moment. The last three races, qualifying, he's not been able to get into Q3. I think it was P20 in Monaco where he crashed out, P11 in Barcelona, P12 in Canada, and the race results have not exactly been flattering for him right now. Lee, in your mind, what do you think's going on with Sergio Perez? Is there a concern that Red Bull may have to question his form of late, or is this just a temporary blip?
I think what's happened is Sergio's confidence, his equilibrium has been dented, and he's lost his mojo. The question is if he'll find it again this season. He obviously started the season strongly. He got his couple of victories, especially obviously Azerbaijan stands out as his weekend of the year. And then it sort of destabilized. And Max came back in obviously Max fashion, and it's completely knocked Sergio's confidence and obviously his hopes of the championship, and he just seems to be spiraling through Max beating him, reliability, or not so much reliability issues, but strategy, things just going wrong, him making mistakes because he's pushing too hard to be too close to Max, and he's overdriving, and he's just not, as I said, he's just not comfortable. He's lost his mojo, and it's stopping that slide, especially as Courtney already alluded to, Aston Martin and Mercedes are coming. Obviously, Ferrari are coming too. That gap will get smaller. I'm not saying they're going to be fighting for race wins, but that gap will get smaller. And as that gap gets smaller, the less chance there is of Sergio finishing P2, like in the start of the season. And it could end up being behind the other three teams, which is not what Red Bull want. So it's just trying to stop that slide. Red Bull need to talk to him and stabilize their driver and go, look, don't overthink, don't panic, just get a good clean weekend, which he did have a good clean weekend in Canada. At the end of the day, he didn't crash, he didn't have any incidents. Not obviously the position that he wanted, or as the team would have wanted either. But maybe it's the start of stopping the slide, and you can start to rebuild Sergio's confidence going into the rest of the summer season.
Yeah, I mean, he's never gone overly well in Canada. It's always been a difficult circuit for him. But I think what will concern Red Bull, particularly from this race and also the Spanish Grand Prix, I think Monaco, once you get qualifying wrong, it's his own worst enemy. You're not going to be able to recover that regardless of the car that you're driving in the modern era. But in Spain, he had a bad qualifying session, qualified just behind George Russell, and George Russell managed to get on the podium. All right, the Mercedes had made improvements, but you would have expected in a normal race, Perez would have been able to carve his way through the field and get himself ahead of George Russell at some point. That didn't happen. And in this race in the Canadian Grand Prix, he was in a similar situation up against both the Ferraris. Now, we can talk about Ferrari a little bit later on, why they surprised a lot of people. But even with Ferrari's, somewhat improved form compared to how they've been in the last few races, and while we'll talk about that in a moment, you'd have still thought Perez would have had enough to beat them on merit. And if anything, he was on a slightly favourable strategy given how the race played out. But even then, he wasn't able to get anywhere near them. Towards the end of the race, where Hamilton was slowly reeling Alonso in on a more favourable tyre strategy, Perez couldn't do the same with the Ferraris. They were leaving him behind. So I think that more than anything else will start to raise some alarm bells with Red Bull and thinking, look, we need to get to the bottom of what's going on here with Sergio Perez, because we've got Max controlling things almost as if he's driving in second gear, and Perez, for doing anything that he possibly can, is struggling to beat our apparent competition, I suppose.
Yeah, I think the thing that kind of sort of I highlighted watching the race was, the biggest thing that's irked me with this Red Bull dominance isn't the fact that obviously they're winning all the races. It's the efficient DRS that they have. I've always thought, look, fair play, great design, but in terms of like watching the spectacle, you're like, oh, right, this is way too easy for them to overtake with the DRS. But even that isn't working for Sergio at the moment, and so I just find it really bizarre. I don't quite know what's going on there, but I remember Lee, you said, while Sergio Perez was having his purple patch, in around Azerbaijan time, you said to us on this podcast that Monaco would be pivotal for Sergio Perez's season. And you've been proven to be absolutely right. It didn't go right for him, and he's completely lost his confidence, because we know how good that car is. And to be, no offensive competition, to be languishing behind the Aston Martins, the Ferrari and the Mercedes, just shows how much he's fallen back. And at the same time, looking back to Max, you can see how confident and happy he is within himself, that he's able to laugh about potentially hitting a sausage curb that would have ruined his race. That is how confident and happy Max is at the moment, because he probably feels, obviously, he'd never want to go out. It would also be embarrassing. It was embarrassing for George Russell to go out in that manner. But Max has that level of confidence to maybe even think, you know what, even if I was to go out in this race, it wouldn't take me long to claw those points back. So the confidence between the drivers is as the gap in confidence is as big as ever.
Yeah. And as I said, I think what will concern Red Bull is Perez is, the difficulty he seems to be finding at the moment at recovering results when qualifying's not gone his way. And I think we've only seen one or two examples this season with Max Verstappen in Miami and Jeddah where he's been in an equally difficult position for different reasons. He's still managed to find his way into the top two and even winning in Miami against his teammate to the surprise of many. So it will be a concern of Red Bull. And I think I want to highlight this a little bit further because there'll be Red Bull fans or Perez fans, understandably, in the comments section saying, oh, come on, guys, it's only a few races. It's a bit of a dip in form. He's still going to be fine and he's going to get back up to speed. And whilst I agree with that to an extent, the picture, we are starting to see the picture of how the championship is looking right now. And Perez is still in P2 at the moment. He's still ahead of Alonso. But, and I emphasize the word but on this, I was scouring around on social media and I was curious as to what the championship would currently look like if Max Verstappen wasn't participating. And I think a lot of people have probably raised this at some point, thinking, oh, it'd be nice to see after 8 or 9 races, how is the championship looking? How would it look if Max Verstappen wasn't in it? Fortunately, I didn't have to do my own calculations and research. We had a few people on social media actually do their own, and they all seemed to match each other, so that was a good sign. They're somewhat reliable. But we had Tomo F1, Tom McCluskey, the famous F1 YouTube and content creator. He was putting something on his stream that I saw, so I'll credit him for this. And the current championship standings, if Max Verstappen wasn't in Formula 1 right now, currently looks like this. Fernando Alonso would be leading the World Championship, a point ahead of Sergio Perez. And Hamilton would only be 18 points behind Perez in third. And Alonso and Hamilton, 2 wins apiece. Checo would have had 5. But I think right now, the variance in form between Perez and Hamilton Alonso, respectively, is quite alarming that they are much more consistent at the moment than he is.
Yeah, and that just highlighted that on that potential scenario, if Max wasn't in there, that he would have had 5 wins to their 2 apiece. Yet they're still in it. That just shows, it's a perfect example of the lack of consistency. That a 5 win or 3 win advantage over the other 2 in that hypothetical scenario, and behind. So that just shows you, unfortunately, how messy it's been as of late for this season so far for Sergio. And it's he knows he can do better, but as I said, it's stopping that spiral and just rebuilding that confidence, and that's where he needs his team, be it Red Bull management, his engineer, obviously himself, and obviously his wider support network, just to build him back up.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I did see from those calculations is, whilst I have the utmost respect and admiration for Max Verstappen, I kind of want to watch that championship, really, because that one's absolutely banging by comparison to this one.
I reckon they should just do a P2 trophy. You know, like the way they've done the Conference League for teams like West Ham. They should have like their own, the P2 trophy. I don't know what the prize money would be. What was just the Sebastian Vettel analogy about a load of jelly beans? We can have that as the prize, but we'll have the Max Verstappen trophy. Yeah, there you go, and then we'll have and the rest.
Yeah.
So then it'll drive up more interest.
Yeah, maybe it will. I mean, the way the broadcast is going, you don't really see or hear much from Max Verstappen unless there's something not quite right. So, we didn't see him for about 40-odd laps before he went over that sausage curb and, as he claimed, nearly knocked himself out by driving over it. So, the broadcast are very much aware of this, and we'll have to wait and see. As I said, I thought it was still an entertaining race, all things considered. But it was nice to keep it, and every now and then to get a check-up on how Max is doing, just to make sure he's still actually in this race, even though he's a long way ahead of everyone else. Let's talk about Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin amid all the Red Bull dominance at the moment. And it's another great performance from him. P2, he himself was managing a few issues as well. Now, they were reporting originally during the race that it was a brake issue that they were managing. Turns out that wasn't the case. It was actually a fuel system error that was showing that the car was losing a bit more fuel than it actually was, so he had to do a lot of lift and coasting after a long battle with Sir Lewis Hamilton, which was very entertaining for a while, and he managed to bring it home. Alonso was saying on the radio he was a bit disappointed because he was hoping to try and fight Max Verstappen for the race win. But I think overall we just got to congratulate Fernando once again for just producing some great stuff, and it was another great battle with Hamilton, and hopefully we see more of that throughout the rest of this season.
Yeah, that will probably become the main battle of F1 2023. The more we see, the better. Because, look, overall, the entertainment spectacle hasn't been as good as we'd expected. So we'll hope to see, the likes of Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso. And then if Ferrari up their game as well, get Leclerc, Sainz and George Russell in the mix, why not make it a bit more interesting? But Fernando Alonso seems to be another driver that's really found his sweet spot since joining Aston Martin. Obviously, his teammates making it a lot more easier for him. I don't think he's going to have much of a challenge having Lance Stroll as a teammate, but he really is. But Fernando is really getting the best out of this package, and to join a team and to hit the ground running that quickly just shows that he's still, even at the age of 41, he's still able to get the best out of these cars.
Yeah, absolutely. I think after the race, Lewis was saying next to Fernando in the press conference or talking to the media that his reactions have slowed down a little bit, for his age. And Fernando was looking at him going, 2 weeks till Austria. We'll see. So it's nice to see the two of them whilst they are fighting each other a lot on track. And that rivalry obviously is still there to a certain degree. Perhaps it doesn't burn as intensely as it used to when they were teammates. But it's nice to see there's a mutual respect there and they're enjoying battling against each other. And do you know what? I think this is one of the best stories this season, the fact that Lewis and Fernando are in very, very close machinery, and because of how great they are respectively, they are more often than not having battles on track, and it's really fun to see. It's just such a shame that we've had to wait, 16 years for them two to go toe-to-toe in level machinery again, but it's been worth the wait. Long may that continue between the two.
Oh yeah, it's definitely an enjoyable spectacle to see those drivers of their caliber, or their caliber, I should say, than the skill. And obviously, from this weekend, I think the only thing that Fernando could feel that he could have done better was his start. And obviously, getting picked into turn one by Lewis probably infuriated him quite a bit, especially as their reaction time was actually similar. So it was just the phase two that he obviously lost ground on in the starting procedure. But apart from that, it was a brilliant weekend from Fernando.
Yeah, a quick one as well. There was a moment between the two in the pit lane when the safety card came out following Logan Sargent's retirement, and the two of them pitted together, and there was a potential for Hamilton to get a penalty for an unsafe release. It was very, very close. I remember saying when I was watching the race live that I wouldn't have been surprised if Hamilton had gotten a penalty, because it looked like Alonso did have to change direction a little bit and slow down. Normally these things are a bit slam dunk sometimes like that. But what did you guys make? It was very close, with all respect. It could have gone either way, in my opinion.
This is where the British bias merchants come for me again.
You can see I'm setting it up for you guys, obviously. Keyboards at the ready, guys.
I think the only thing I can look at that sort of saved Lewis's bacon, that's probably a bad pun considering he's a vegan, was the fact that I think Lewis stayed just enough to the left. So you'll talk from their perspective to his left to not really block Alonso. It was obviously very close. I think the thing that made it look a little bit more dramatic than it was is when you saw Alonso going like that with the steering, and we saw Toto Wolff imitating it. Obviously when he was watching back in the garage, but I think it was that fine margin. I feel if Lewis had veered more to the right, it would have been a slam dunk. But I do agree. I was surprised it wasn't a penalty. But I think that might have been that that sort of positioning on the pit lane that might have saved him.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, it could have gone either way. Toto Wolff actually did mention afterwards when they asked him that, it was a little bit of drama from the Aston Martin driver. As he said, he was having a little bit of fun at Alonso's expense there, sort of doing the little steering wheel motion, saying he was putting it on a little bit and slowing down to try and get Lewis to get a penalty. I mean, look, it's Fernando. I wouldn't put him past him to do that, knowing that everybody is watching and listening in, so that, he's going to try and game it a little bit if he can. But I think the way it played out, I think it was the right call to not penalise Lewis, purely and simply because of the way things panned out with Fernando Alonso. And I know you don't judge incidents based on how things play out, but a 5-second penalty wouldn't have changed the result either way. And in a way, it allowed a fair, straight fight between the two anyway, which Fernando managed to get the better of Lewis in the end.
Oh, yeah. And another thing I probably want to point out, obviously, I don't know what the brake differential, not a differential, the difference in speed when Fernando slowed down. But obviously, they do have the indication of it was a heavy slam on the brake or if he just lifted and coasted, or if he slowed down by 1 mile per hour, 1 kilometer per hour. So that could be also an indicator of how close it was or not. Which obviously, if it was a big slam on the brake, then obviously that's a real no. So that probably was also referenced.
Yeah. Well, obviously, there's a lot of play here. It depends on the stewards as well. How lenient they were. I thought they seemed quite lenient this weekend, all things considered. There was a similar incident with Lando Norris, who I thought should definitely have probably got a penalty for an unsafe release early in the race. Was it? I can't remember if it was Alex Albon or Ocon, which one it was that he got ahead of. But that seemed more like a slammed up penalty. But they didn't penalise that one either. So... yeah, I think all things considered, I don't think it would have really made a blind bit of difference if they'd have been penalised or not. So I think on this occasion, I don't think we need to draw too much to it other than just it was what it was and just move on. Let's talk a little bit about Lance Stroll at his home Grand Prix this weekend. Snatched a P9 at the very end over the line ahead of Valtteri Bottas. I think it was like 3 thousandths or 300ths of a second between the two at the line. So unfortunate for Bottas to make a bit of a pig's ear of it at the final corner, to lose P9. But Lance Stroll, again, another recovery job. Did the same thing in Spain, managed to get up into the top 6, I believe. In this race, P9 after qualifying in 13th to failing to get through Q2. For the first time, we've heard words from his father that he wasn't overly impressed with Lance's performance this weekend. And I can't help but feel that perhaps because this was in front of a home crowd, the expectation was much higher. But perhaps we're seeing the first signs that Lawrence Stroll is starting to have doubts over whether or not his son is capable of producing the results that this car is clearly capable in the hands of someone like Fernando Alonso, or even a driver like perhaps Perez or Carlos Sainz by comparison for that next level below the elite.
You have to feel for Lance because Lawrence delivered the worst possible line that a parent can say about his child. He effectively said, "I'm not angry, I'm disappointed," which is probably the worst thing a parent could say. So, he's been a good dad. He's given his son a kick up the backside, because we know there's a lot of talk. Look, we're guilty of it. Say, he's got the safest seat in F1 because his dad's pretty much the owner of the team. So I just think Lawrence is sort of giving them the reminder: yes, you're my son, this, that, and the other. But we're in a tight midfield battle here. We've raised it on several occasions that if Lance Stroll doesn't up his performance, that could be the difference between P2 and P4 in the constructors, which is going to cost the team a lot of money. So obviously they do need Lance to up his game to, elevate Aston Martin.
I mean, what are your thoughts, Lee? Because Aston Martin's comments about Lance Stroll's physical condition after his injuries that he suffered in pre-season is that Lance was only really fully fit after the Monaco Grand Prix. And since then, Lance's finishing results have been a little bit better. But I still feel that we're seeing elements of his driving that aren't quite good enough to be putting that car exactly where it should be at the moment. I mean, are we being too harsh or should we be giving him more time? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, firstly, on the injury, we probably should give him more time because he's still not up to full health, and then get building up all that motor memory that he struggled with through the start of the season. So they have to give him credit on that. But touching on what obviously Courtney said, is obviously I don't know the shareholders' information of the Formula One team or Aston Martin as a whole as a car manufacturer, but I'm sure there are other shareholders which will be applying pressure on Lawrence because obviously the intention is to eventually be in a championship fight. And they go, "We've got this good car, but we're not going to be securing P2 because your son can't bring back the points when this driver can." And there's only so much defending Lawrence can do in stakeholder meetings or in senior management meetings that to defend his son. And eventually there will come a point that if they really want to be a championship contender or win a championship, which is obviously Lawrence's goal, Lance has to deliver or he's out because they won't win the championship if he's not delivering. And I don't think they're there yet. I'm making that call about obviously losing the safety seat in Formula One, as Courtney likes to put it. But it's coming probably a lot sooner than Lance would like to probably admit.
Yeah.
That's a great point, Lee, because if Aston Martin continue to perform at this level where they are seen as potential world championship winners, that seat's going to be a lot more sought after by other drivers. And we all know it happens in F1 almost as much as it happens in football. There's a lot of agent talk. There's a lot of pressure from third parties. And again, you made a really good point about the other shareholders and the team thinking, but let's say, for example, Charles Leclerc wants a new challenge. He's seeing what's going on at Aston Martin. They're clearly building something there. Obviously, Lawrence is going to have his own self-interest, wanting his son to be in a good car, potentially challenging for a world championship. But the other shareholders will be thinking, well, we've got an opportunity to have Fernando Alonso and Charles Leclerc. If we deliver the right car, we could win the constructors. So the stakes could be rising if Aston Martin continue to do well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you have to consider that when Aston Martin are making progress and they've got this plan for 2026 where they feel realistically they're going to be in a position to have all the resource and capabilities and personnel to the degree and the level of what Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari currently enjoy. They want to also have the drivers that are going to be capable of delivering on that as well. And, you know, as much as we can pay homage and respect to Fernando Alonso, is he going to be around in 2026? Maybe. I mean, this is Alonso, so we can't rule it out. But more realistically, Lance Stroll's going to have to make that step up. Otherwise, his father, Lawrence, is going to have a very difficult decision over whether or not his son is going to be driving that car beyond. I don't envy him by any stretch for that reason. That's why it's been so difficult. So, moving on to the next part of the show. Now, as part of our reviews this season, we've got some extra segments that we're putting in. Courtney, I'm going to invite you now, as this part of the show, to give us your rant for this weekend. So, what is making Courtney's rant this weekend?
Oh, this one, I never thought I'd be raising this on an F1 podcast, but the audacity that Groundhog had in FP1, the eagerly anticipated FP1 session, millions of viewers at home waiting to see Red Bull get a 1-2 in practice, were robbed of the chance of seeing it because the Groundhog had the audacity to chew through the wires. What an absolute joke.
It was a strange one, wasn't it? Because we had the red flag early on with, was it Pierre Gasly that was breaking down? When that had happened, we thought, okay, they'll clear the car, no harm done, we'll lose a few minutes and we'll crack on. Because, you know, because it's a treat circuit, the Canadian marshals at the circuit at the time, they're usually very, very good. And, yeah, you just crack on and continue. But it wasn't. And then we had issues about, you know, people were saying it was groundhogs. I think there was one theory going around saying it was Otmar Schaffner pulling the plug somewhere on the mains to stop like, if we can't get some data, no one else can. Very, very strange stuff. But there's often been a lot of wildlife lurking around at the Canadian circuit. We've had hedgehogs. We've had, I think there was a lizard on the circuit once. I think Max Verstappen drove past it. It might have been Singapore. I might be wrong.
That was Singapore.
So we've had some weird occurrences. But yes, groundhogs.
The seagulls.
The seagulls as well. That's right. Of course, with Vettel and Hamilton. Vettel having to swerve around the seagull and helping Hamilton get a win in that race, according to Vettel at least. So yeah, very, very strange occurrences on that one. And yeah, it was quite funny at the time, I must admit, even though we lost a practice session, as you said, Courtney, where we'd watched Red Bull dominate. But yeah,
I was really disappointed because I'm in charge of the Instagram, and for the preview, I had a load of groundhog related puns. But just as I was about to post, I saw that Instagram was down, so I was robbed. I was robbed of the chance once again by technical demons. Technology has not been on my side this week. Once again, I was robbed of the chance to put, you know, a catalogue of dad jokes on the Instagram feed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we missed out a lot on that one. But obviously these groundhogs are much more powerful. Maybe there's a revolution coming. I don't know. We'll have to keep an eye because they've obviously managed to find a way to stop you on the Instagram as well, Courtney. So yeah, we'll see. Let us know your thoughts on that one, guys. Very, very random stuff. Let's move on back to Mercedes in particular. And George Russell, got to talk about him. Difficult afternoon for him. You know, decent effort in qualifying, managed to get himself into the picture. I think he was there or thereabouts for that fight for the podium, but I don't think he really challenged Fernando and Lewis to a degree where perhaps, you know, he might get in the mix. He always seemed to be a little bit off those two. But then he had that incident through the chicane where he smacked the wall for the rear of his car, completely got a bit greedy on the curbs. And even though he didn't exactly ruin his race because he had to retire through some brake wear issues, he did actually do a pretty good job to recover it, but ultimately come on away with nothing. And a very disappointing day for George Russell.
Yeah, I think it was very disappointing. Obviously, where he started, he definitely thought he was in for the podium fight. My suspicion is he felt that he was starting to become a bit detached from Fernando and Lewis for that podium fight, and he wanted that podium, and he started to overdrive, which obviously caused him to be greedy in that curb and bite too much of the wall, so to put it. But that recovery drive, unfortunately, as you said, the brake issues, but that recovery drive was a really solid drive after that. And it'd been really interesting to see what he could have done if he hadn't retired and if he could have closed off and towards the Ferraris. But it was really shame that he missed out for him. But it's just another what could have been for George, his second DNF of the season.
I think he got up to the point where he was right behind Alex Albon in that train. So it would have been very interesting to see how he would have coped with all that. I mean, he was he on the harder tyres at the time? He was running those quite long. So he did have quite a ways to go before he did retire. So it would have been interesting to see if he would have had to have made another stop. But he was right in there. Maybe he could have got P7. I think the Ferraris and Perez would have been a bit too far, considering he probably might have had to have made another stop. But it was still a decent effort to recover it. But once again, more points going away from George Russell, although this time it was definitely his own doing rather than the reliability issues in Australia.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things to say. I think the obviously my main rant was about the groundhog, but I'm a little bit more old school when it comes to, things that are on track to stop the drivers from taking a mick on, obviously, track limits. I'm not keen on sausage curbs whatsoever. I do feel they cause a lot of problems. I think they are dangerous because it just showed even with Max, comfortably in front in a league of his own, even he almost had a moment. And I'm all for gravel traps. I think obviously they will punish drivers without putting their safety in jeopardy. And sometimes in wet races, the gravel traps can sometimes be even more of a deterrent than the sausage curbs. But also, George Russell in general, Lewis has kind of taken a step forward in the last few races. And I feel that, having been in battles with likes of Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, and Charles Leclerc on a good weekend, I think it's really setting in the challenge that George is facing. Do I think he can get through this challenge? Absolutely. But I do feel this is going to be one of the more testing moments of his career.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to see now that Mercedes have a much more comfortable car for their drivers, that Lewis has upped his game, understandably so. And, George Russell is still doing a very, very good job, but he's just still missing a tenth here or there compared to his teammate, or the consistency is not quite as good as it is for Lewis. And we were talking incredibly high standards here, so it's not like George isn't driving well. He is driving very well, but obviously Lewis is driving extraordinarily well considering what he's got. And that's a mantle that very, very few drivers on the current grid or even in F1 history can live with. So that's the aim for him long term, and it'll be interesting to see how he progresses throughout the season as Mercedes become more and more comfortable and understand their car better. Will he progress with that? We know Lewis will. He always does, but it will be interesting to see how George gets on this season, because he's great in a car that's very difficult to drive, but now the car is getting better as it was last year. We saw Lewis raise his game all the time, whereas George had peaks and troughs. I know he won in Brazil last season, which incidentally is the last time in the last 19 races that a car other than a Red Bull has won, which is an amazing stat in its own right. That just says it all. I thought I'd get that one in there. But at the same time, yeah, we need to keep an eye on George, see how he's going. But so far, he's doing all right. But obviously, if he wants to get to that elite level like Lewis is and Fernando is and Max is at the moment, that's obviously what he needs to do next. So wait and see. Lee, let's move on to your segment now. Who is making your sympathy pit lane this weekend?
Well, for me, or for my sympathy pit lane, I should say, is my candidate is Charles Leclerc. Obviously, as race day, through a bit of fortune, the race strategy did come towards Ferrari. Obviously, the safety car helped. At the time, a lot of people probably thought staying out and not pitting was probably a bad choice. but it did work, and obviously they went for the track position, and they managed to make the gap to keep position to the rest of the midfield. However, from why I'm putting Charles in the pit lane is more because of Saturday, and not just because of the poor qualifying result, but between the miscommunication or the direction of the team regarding qualifying and obviously the tyre choices and the lack of tyre choices, the trust between Charles and Ferrari are gone. It's completely broken, and that's why Charles is there for me today. He's a driver with no direction. Obviously, he wants to win, but he doesn't feel the team's got his back, and I'm sure he will be looking out and looking for another team. I know he's still got another year or so on his contract, or more than a year. I don't know. But he's had enough of Ferrari. That's my feeling from the way he was speaking on Saturday. He's no longer being polite and nice about Ferrari as you've seen in previous years. He was putting it all out there in the public, all the dirty laundry, so to speak. And he just feels for the guy that from the cheery chappy go-getting 2019 Charles is completely gone, and it's like, what's happened to that Charles? As Ferrari have destroyed him like they did with Sebastian and like they did with Fernando, and it's the Ferrari pressure got too much. Next, we'll see Charles' hairline receding, like he did with Sebastian, and then obviously using Courtney's analogy earlier, he'll go to Aston Martin and the hair comes back in the full flowing lock. So I just feel for the guy, and that's why he makes my sympathy pit lane today.
Yeah, I mean, that image of Sebastian Vettel in the seat fitting at Aston Martin when he'd shaved his head looked very, very concerning. And, his hair grew out properly again. And maybe that was just one of those things where he just shaved his head and it all grew out and it was all fine. With Leclerc, that's something I don't think I would want to see, quite frankly. I think there are some people that can make that look work. Leclerc probably isn't one of them. So, hopefully he won't stress out too much and lose his hair as a result of what's going on at Ferrari. But it is an interesting topic with Ferrari because they had a very contrasting weekend of fortunes. Normally this season, we've often talked about Ferrari being a great team on a Saturday and a terrible team on a Sunday. This weekend, it was completely the opposite way around, which to Ferrari fans, myself included here, this will be very, very encouraging. However, we do have to merit this weekend in isolation because this was a circuit that definitely played to the strengths of Ferrari. We knew Ferrari was going to be good in Canada anyway because Ferrari's weakness is tyre wear and high-speed corners and mid-speed corners to a degree. There aren't any high mid-speed corners in Canada. They're all slower corners and, some change of direction, but not too much to really upset the Ferrari. But they still did a very good job on race day. The question, I think, with Ferrari, when we break down their weekend, I think I should say, we need to compartmentalise this in two parts. And in a way, it's kind of its own episode. So I'm going to try and be brief here. On Saturday, there was definitely some communication issues at Ferrari, something that we've actually seen a lot this season, and you could even go a few years back to say this is the same issue at Ferrari, even into the Vettel-Alonso days at Ferrari, not just Leclerc and Sainz in particular. But we had Charles Leclerc, the miscommunication on the soft tyres. Leclerc wanted to go on the soft tyres when Albon did when the track was drying up. Eventually he did. Albon ended up being fastest in Q2. Leclerc didn't even get through, although I still think there was an element that Leclerc could have still done it anyway. I don't think he was too hard done by. And then also we had the communication issues with Carlos Sainz, where he was impeding quite a few people. A very dangerous moment where he impeded Pierre Gasly, which cost Gasly a chance of getting through into Q2. Sainz got a free-place grid drop as a result. And it just, once again, boast the issues Ferrari are having with their communications and the confusion that they're causing, not only amongst their drivers, but also with themselves as well. It just feels like every time something is happening on circuit and you see a replay in qualifying about a driver being impeded or someone getting something wrong, I just naturally think I'm going to see a Ferrari at the cause of it, really.
Yeah, like we obviously have a WhatsApp group, so we're obviously reacting to things live, and we're seeing these mistakes Ferrari make, and we're not even surprised by it anymore. It's almost become a part of the weekend routine. And if you have a look at the teams that Ferrari will want to be competing with in the long term, the likes of Red Bull and Mercedes, more often than not, particularly in changeable conditions, it seems that Red Bull and Mercedes are able to get the best possible results. Whereas Ferrari, you're waiting for it. It's not even a shock. You're just thinking, how are Ferrari gonna F this up? and they managed to do it again spectacularly.
Yeah, there's no 7 or 8 or 9 out of 10 from Ferrari. It's either a 10 out of 10 from Ferrari or a 2 out of 10 or a 1 out of 10. It's just either a shambles or perfection. And Ferrari's problem this season is that when things don't go perfect for them, they can't get 90% out of the weekend that they would want to. It's either really bad or really good. And I think we saw complete contrast of this on Saturday and Sunday, whereas Saturday they were terrible and their drivers, didn't exactly help themselves either for different reasons. Sunday, however, I can't remember, despite the fact they didn't win the race or get on the podium, I can't remember a day where Ferrari put it all together on a Sunday, and I can't really floor them at any point throughout Sunday at all, whether the drivers, their own individual performances, the way the card held up and the way it was battling. Perhaps the only criticism is they struggled in the opening stint to overtake the DRS train with Norris and Ocon and Albon ahead of them, and Hulkenberg as well, because he started up quite highly. But then obviously when the safety car came out, Ferrari made a bold strategy choice on the medium tyres, which was the softer of the two compounds that was being used this week. Obviously the soft ones were available, but I think only Gasly really used them and Perez at the end to get fastest lap. But we were expecting Ferrari to pit on the mediums. They didn't. They ended up staying out to about 38, 39 laps before they put the hard tyres on. And I tell you what, I was going mad. I thought they'd absolutely mess this up, thinking, what on earth are they doing? I think a lot of people were questioning Ferrari's strategy, but it played a blinder for them. And they finished P4 and P5, and I'll be honest with you guys, I think that was the absolute maximum Ferrari could have got out of this weekend, given where they ended up in qualifying on Saturday. So I think we have to give massive credit to them for not only performing very, very well on track, they nailed the strategy as well, which is very un-Ferrari-like at the moment.
Yeah, the only additional criticism I would add from my personal view is they told Carlos to hold station. I'd much rather had them getting a bit of fight and Carlos go and overtake Charles, but then again, that would be another thing to add to the sympathy pit lane that Charles was overtaken by Carlos. So that's why they told him to hold station. It's to bring back the points, but that's my only other criticism is they had to play that card.
Don't you think, though, that given everything we've already said about Charles Leclerc, do you think they would have been conscious about potentially peeing him off during a race? So they played this safe. We're in a great position. Let's bring the points home. I do feel there's been a little bit of element of that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, they were even giving him tips on where Sainz was faster than him on the circuit. Now, of course, I'm not listening to the Ferrari team radio the whole race. I'm sure someone out there that probably will say, well, Carlos was getting instructions on to do this and do that to help him over Leclerc. Now, I don't think for 1 second that Ferrari probably weren't considering that they need to help Charles out and give him a little bit of favouritism over Sainz because of perhaps the contract situation or trying to convince Charles this is the right place that you need to be. We saw Charles at Le Mans and how much he loved being a part of that. He wasn't just being a spectator, he was actively being engaged, not involved in the team, but he was looking at certain information, he was learning about this and learning about that. Both himself and Carlos Sainz have talked about the prospect of potentially one day driving in the hypercar program for Ferrari at Le Mans, even if it's just a one-off at Le Mans, to be a part of that. And I think it really hurts for Ferrari fans to see Leclerc in the manner that he's in at the moment, where while Sunday was a very good day and he'd be a lot more optimistic about things, he really wants to win at Ferrari. I'm fairly confident that if Charles Leclerc was given a contract right now, there's probably a 90% chance he would sign it to stay at Ferrari, even though a lot of us will probably look at that and think, you know what, Charles, perhaps you really need to consider this and assess your options. There might be a better seat somewhere else, just for your own mental health more than anything else. And we don't want to see great talents go to waste, but Ferrari are their own worst enemies at the best of times. So, take from that what you can. So it's a really hard one at the moment. And I agree. I think there were certain elements to the race on Sunday where they were probably favouring Charles. I will chuck the caveat in that even though Sainz was told not to challenge Charles and Charles was told that Sainz was not going to threaten you, when Charles got into a rhythm on those harder tyres in the second stint and he started putting the laps in, he left Sainz behind. And I don't think it was just the fact that Sainz weren't pushing. I think he thought he was going to catch Leclerc, but once Leclerc got his tyres warmed up and he got to groove with things, because Sainz pitted earlier than Leclerc, he got preferential treatment on strategy to cover Perez off. Charles was long gone. So, make of it what you will. That's my thoughts on it. But overall, a mixed weekend for Ferrari. We should say as well, Sky Germany were reporting that after the tyre test at Barcelona following the Spanish Grand Prix, Ferrari did learn a lot about their new car concept that they're sort of going down. They did learn a lot of issues with this car, how to address them with the tyre wear. Probably explains why they were very competitive and made the tyres last as long as they did. There wasn't too much thermal degradations. They looked after them pretty well. So maybe this is a sign that Ferrari are starting to finally get on top of their tyre wear issues, and maybe that will produce better race pace on the Sunday. They owed it to a setup thing as well. So, you can take that for what it is. Overall, Sunday much better than Saturday. Hopefully for Ferrari's sake, they can have a great Saturday and a great Sunday, and we'll see them in that fight with Aston Martin and Mercedes, because they look pretty good race pace wise. So yeah, long may that continue.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely want it to continue. Obviously, we've got, at the moment, it's looking like a two-way fight for P2, but if Ferrari can get in the mix and get a three-way fight for P2, obviously the dream would be that we get a four-way fight for P1. But at the moment, that gap is closing, but we have to wait and see how the season unfolds. But for P2, that would be very nice if we can get Ferrari in the mix and get, as Courtney said, Charles Leclerc fighting George, Lewis, Fernando, obviously Carlos. Well, we'll see about Lance. And that'd be a very enjoyable podium if that happens.
Well, there's only one podium so far for Ferrari, and that was Leclerc in Baku, and Sainz has been pretty consistent. Another top 5 finish for him. So, hopefully Ferrari, they can keep that going. I can't believe we've gone nearly 50 minutes now, and this is probably my fault trying to structure this episode properly, without mentioning the great Alex Albon. What a drive from Alex Albon in the Williams. P7, thoroughly deserved. I know he'd made a big, massive DRS train for himself, and this played to the strengths of the Williams is being so quick in a straight line. But I'm not going to take anything away from this performance. It's incredible stuff from him in arguably the worst car on the grid right now. And, he managed to do a great job in qualifying. Got it into Q3. He was fastest in Q2. He made that gamble onto the soft tyres first. It paid off massively for him. And I think the only downside to all of that, he was denied the opportunity to do a good lap in Q3 because of the changing conditions and everything else that was going on. So overall, I think an incredible stuff. He had a fresh power unit this weekend, so it probably did help him a little bit, especially with defending. But P7 for Albon, not only has that moved Williams into P9 in the Constructors' Championship ahead of AlphaTauri, that was Williams' best result in dry conditions since 2017. Wow. It really shows how difficult things have been for Williams, and they have been pushing this update package through. We did on the preview, we were showing the difference in the floor between the Williams and Mercedes. It was like F2 versus F1. But they've brought some upgrades onto this car, and it's worked wonders for them. And I really hope this is a sign that Williams are really now establishing themselves in the midfield. And with Alex Albon, there's no reason why not. The guy is doing GOAT things right now. He really is.
Yeah, but he was easily the driver of the day for me. What a great story, not only for Albon, but also for Williams. You've already touched on it, that we're all taking a mick, let's be honest. We're all taking a mick out of Williams for, the simplicity, let's say, of their floor compared to the teams at the top. So it's great for them to make some kind of statement, and also gives them some kind of energy, something to strive for. Because look, it's only human nature. If you're languishing at the bottom, it's very difficult to motivate yourself, week in, week out. So this might give Williams the energy to kick on, try to take themselves further up the Constructors' Championship. But they certainly do have a golden nugget in Alex Albon. I'm really pleased for Alex. I was really worried about his career when his confidence took a massive beating when he was at Red Bull. You sometimes worry when drivers leave F1, will they come back? Will they come back to the same drivers they were before? And it seems that move to Williams is really giving him a second lease of life. And long may that continue for both driver and team.
And it's so tight in the Constructors' Championship right now between Alfa Romeo, Haas and Williams. Alfa 7th on 9 points, Haas at 8th on 8 points, Williams are 9th on 7 points. It only takes a few results like these to change the pecking order between those teams. And McLaren are probably a bit out of reach for those teams, but given how tight it is in the midfield, as I said, the drivers can make the difference. And Alex Albon, he's had 2 great results this season. Imagine where Williams would have been if he'd have managed to consolidate that P6 in Australia and not been it there when he was in a great position there. Williams right now, they have a difficult car. but they do have an advantage that they are utilising very well in their straight line speed. And as they improve the aero on that car, it will get better and better at other circuits. We're going to Austria next and Silverstone after that. Those could be two circuits where Williams could be very good, and they've got a big upgrade package coming in Silverstone from what I hear. So you can't rule P7 out for Williams as well, and that'd be a monumental result for them if they were able to get that.
Oh yeah, especially with Alex leading that team forward, and obviously his development feedback and it's just his racecraft. I have to add, I thought through the race that he forget he was in a race and he thought he was playing Train Simulator on the Montreal Metro and just going around and not for over 40 laps on those tyres and drives behind him on fresher tyres and holding them off. That was just really impressive stuff from Alex.
Yeah, it was Gandalf-worthy stuff. You shall not pass. Really, really good stuff from Alex Albon. You love to see it. You love to see Albon doing well in Formula One right now. Valtteri Bottas, we've also got to mention him. Big shout out to him. Even though he missed out narrowly on P9, still got a point for Alfa Romeo, which now puts them firmly ahead of Haas and Williams in the Constructors' Championship, albeit very small margin. But they're all going to count the way points are at the moment, and it's so competitively tight in that midfield. But a return to form for Bottas, and we often compare drivers to their teammate as a first barometer of performance. Zhou was having a difficult weekend, reliability issues, not the best race for him either. Bottas, by comparison, much more like the Valtteri Bottas we've often been used to.
Yeah, I think we need to criticise drivers and teams more often because they seem to shut us up almost immediately. Both Williams and Valtteri Bottas are at the wrong end of it for our preview, and as I said, they've silenced us after their performance at that point. And obviously, we need to see a bit more consistency moving forward. We know how good Valtteri can be. We know he can still generally do more. He can put in those kind of performances more often. So hopefully that result that he got, we were worried about him. Hopefully this result he's got can help him kick on, because now we're going into a really important part of the season. Races are going to be coming thick and fast, and these are going to be season-defining performances for these guys. So let's hope that that's more of that to come from Valtteri.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got to, mention AlphaTauri as well when we're talking about all of this, because they'll feel really hard done by, given that, despite how well Tsunoda has been driving, and I think if this championship was awarding more points for further positions down, AlphaTauri would be in a much better position with Yuki Tsunoda in particular. And they find themselves in P10 in the bottom of all because of a few Bunzai results for Albon and Williams and Haas and Bottas and Alfa Romeo, and Zhou as well, of course, should be included. They've done the same thing, whereas you could argue Tsunoda's been much more consistent than all of those guys, but it just hasn't worked out for them. So that is going to be a concern for AlphaTauri right now. I think they're like 5 points behind Williams, which, 5 points isn't a lot, but considering how scarce points are for these guys when you've got 4 teams that are established as the top 8 cars with the Alpines, obviously, the top 10 really, if you've got the Red Bulls, Mercedes, Aston Martin, Ferrari and Alpine established teams in that top 10, it's hard to get a point, so everyone's going to count at the moment. We should also talk about Haas as well. Nico Hülkenberg very much had a contrasting weekend. Friday he had a blown engine, was it, in practice? Saturday qualifies P2 on merit, but then gets a free-place grid drop for going too fast on the Delta during a red flag. And I know people said that's harsh, but it's pretty much a slam dunk if you do that with a red flag going on. And he went from 5th all the way down to 15th on merit. He just plummeted right down the order, which I'm not surprised, because the issues that Haas are having at the moment would suggest that it very much is the extreme Saturday car compared to Sunday, even more so than Ferrari at the moment.
Yeah, they do seem to be having their qualifying highlights this year. Does make you question if they're going for the media attention, get up a high result, set up for qualifying and then disappear in the race. That's not me accusing them or anything. It's just a question to ask. But it does hurt that when you, especially for Nico, it's like I still hold out hope that he'll get on the podium one day. And obviously, I didn't think he will be on the podium qualifying P2. But it's like, oh, come on, he's P2. Go on, you get on the podium. Oh, P5. I mean, it's not going to happen at 15. That really hurt. Not gonna lie on
It was
that
a fall
one.
from grace, wasn't it? Let's be
Yeah.
honest.
It really was, and it's a shame for Hulkenberg because he did such a great job on Saturday. You know, getting it on the front row. Obviously, he wasn't able to start there, but I don't think his finishing position would have been that different, even if he started second. He just would have been a bit. It would have been an awkward start because you've got
Maybe 12th.
Yeah, well, maybe, but you'd have had Alonso and the two Mercedes all over the back of him. So it was like, for them, they were like, oh, glad we don't have to go around that Haas, for example. So, yeah, I mean, people were talking about Haas, you know, the connection with Ferrari. Were they going to go down the same route Ferrari are with their concept? And from what I've been hearing from Haas, the word is that right now they can't really afford to do that. They have to wait and see how this pans out for Ferrari before they commit to a similar strategy on changing their concept, because a lot of the issues that Haas have had are inherent from the issues that Ferrari have been having on their concept. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see how that goes now. But right now, a very difficult situation for Haas, and I'm not sure it's going to get any better for them right now. They do appear very, very vulnerable. So we'll have to wait and see. A quick note on Magnussen and De Vries. They had a bit of a interesting battle this weekend in the race. There was a moment where De Vries was very aggressive to Magnussen, forcing him out wide at turn 1 on the exit, and then at turn 3 completely locked his brakes and took him and Magnussen off the circuit, really. And surprised the stewards didn't get involved in that, because it was a bit naughty from Nick De Vries there.
It was clumsy, but the best way to describe it is clumsy. And De Vries is really showing a driver who's, you know, lacking confidence, who's will already feel paranoid that he could be losing his seat soon, because the decision making becomes a lot more rash. You know, we've seen it with so many drivers in the past, and I just feel that De Vries is falling into a hole that's very difficult to get out of. So he really does need to take stock, because I just mentioned with the Valtteri Bottas thing, we're now going into a season-defining series of races. So this is just time for Nick De Vries to really take stock and reevaluate the way he's approaching a race weekend, because so far this season, it's not working for him.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, until then, I don't think it was that bad from Nick De Vries, but yeah, very clumsy driving, overly aggressive as well, and not really what you want to be seeing at the moment. But, you know, we'll have to see how he gets on throughout this season. Before we finish off, we haven't even talked about McLaren yet. Very strange race. McLaren, roughly where I expected them to be. Bit unfortunate not to get points. Lando Norris drove exceptionally well for the 99% of the race and was very much deserving of points. However, whilst he avoided a penalty for an unsafe release, he did get a penalty for, as the stewards put it out on the broadcast, unsportsmanlike conduct. Very, very strange wording, but for those of you wondering what it was that Norris actually done, and we didn't see this on broadcast either, which is a bit confusing, F1 journalist Chris Medland, F1 on his Twitter, confirmed that the Norris time penalty was for slowing to create a gap to Piastri ahead behind the safety car, penalising him for delaying the cars who aren't allowed to overtake at that point. And I think we need to clarify what effectively this meant. So when the first safety car came out following Logan Sargent's retirement, Piastri was just ahead of Norris on the road. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Obviously, McLaren were planning to pit both their cars, so they had to double stack. And at the time, Norris was about 3 seconds behind his teammate when you factor in the safety car delta. So obviously they were much slower, so the gap was going to be larger than it actually was at full speed. Now, people were saying, oh, well, Norris was just going a little bit slower. And I think it was like 6 seconds after they'd had their stops and everything else. Why was Norris penalised for going a bit slower? The issue at hand here is Norris can, if he wants to, slow down a little bit to create a bit of a gap to mitigate the time lost from double stacking the cars. The problem is he had Ocon and Leclerc right behind him as well. And he ended up slowing them down as a result. So you can't really be doing that. You can't impede other cars doing that to try and game the system or game an advantage. So I think it was a slam dunk penalty. But what do you guys make of the wording, unsportsmanlike conduct? Because for me, unsportsmanlike conduct would suggest that Lando Norris got out the car and punched somebody. Not for slowing down a little bit to try and do... I mean, do you think that was the right wording? Or maybe something that the stewards are putting out there to try and set the tone, really?
Maybe. I think Ted Kravitz, obviously in the British commentary, put it, you know, Lando Norris is probably like one of the nicest guys on the grid. So that kind of phrasing doesn't really suit a guy like Lando. But I think you've said it perfectly. It's setting the tone. We know these drivers can definitely be naughty, particularly when we've got so many tight battles that can obviously define race weekends for various drivers. So I just think they're trying to, as you said, set the tone, and try to get the drivers to behave themselves. But as you said, with Lando's weekend in general, I thought he drove exceptionally well. Not only is attacking the driver's head, considering the McLaren knew they were going to struggle this weekend with the straight line speed. It was vital, and Lando Norris seemed to be able to both attack and defend sublimely. And for me, it's time for this lad to be in the top seat. I really do feel, look, I wanted to see McLaren get back, competing with the others. These new regulation changes in 2022 gave them a chance. Doesn't seem to be working, and I think it's time for Lando Norris to take that step up.
Yeah, perhaps so. I mean, he drove incredibly well. I mean, let's not take away, let's not the incident at hand take away from an otherwise brilliant performance from Lando Norris. But we've seen this week in, week out right now, Lee. And for me, I'm not surprised that someone as young as Lando Norris is being considered by a lot of the top teams as a potential future star and someone that needs to be in a better car right now. I think the only solace we can take away from this is that, despite McLaren's issues, we are still able to see not just him as well. I mean, Piastri was pretty decent as well, but we're seeing a driver in Lando Norris who is clearly, looking to be in that upper echelon of F1 drivers right now.
Yeah, he's displaying his racecraft and thinking ahead of brilliantly week after week. Obviously, Oscar has narrowed the gap compared to the start of the season regarding their performances, but Lando's just another level, and it's a shame that obviously the penalty occurred. But yes, that was a slam dunk. You're not supposed to do that. So no, I'm not questioning the state of the penalty, but having him up the front and being in the fight for championships, being if McLaren somehow developing the car. I mean, if you listen to Mika Hakkinen, McLaren's update in the summer are going to make them faster than Red Bull. That must be one of an update if that's true.
What a PR guy he is.
I would love it. I love it if it's true. And then Lando's like, bam, bam, yeah. But I don't expect that at all. But he deserves to be fighting up the top, fighting for these race wins, fighting for the championship. He's got the caliber. He's still such a young guy, and he's got many, many years from Formula One. So it's scary to think with Lando, with Max, about what, and particularly other drivers of their generation, about how far they can go if they keep going to the ages of Lewis and Fernando, what they could achieve in their careers, potentially, obviously given the right car. But it's some scary thoughts. But the sport's in good hands in the drivers that we're getting from this current generation.
Yeah, the only thing that we can hope for is that they're all going to be in relatively competitive machinery by the time that they are fighting for the top honours in F1, which only seems inevitable, but often is one of those things that robs fans of a truly incredible championship. We need something similar to what we had in 2012, but to last the test of the season. That's kind of where the benchmark, I think, was for that kind of thing. It rarely happens in F1, unfortunately, but we can live in hope. Anyway, guys, I think that's all we got time for this episode. It did go on a little bit longer, so I apologise for that one if you guys used to an hourly episode. But as always, thank you for supporting us, and of course continue to do so. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you are new, and don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcasting platform. It really does help us, guys, so please help us out if you can. But until then, guys, we are back with an episode later this week for a bit of news and discussion, as we don't have a Grand Prix now until the Austrian Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time. But until then, please stay safe. Thank you so much for tuning in, as always, and we'll see you in the next episode of the DNF1 F1 podcast. And remember, as always, if you're not first, you're probably DNF1. Take care.
See you soon.
Goodbye.